Why does it feel like Shedeur Sanders is being held to a completely different standard than everyone else? Seriously, think about it. We've watched this entire conversation unfold, and something just doesn't add up. The same habits, the same traits, the same on-field tendencies, yet somehow the reaction is never the same. When Shedeur does something, it becomes a headline, a problem, a flaw, but when other quarterbacks do the exact same thing, it barely gets mentioned. And that's where things start to feel off. Because this isn't just about one play or one mechanic, it's about how a player is being talked about before he even gets a real shot. And lately, there's been a lot of buzz online with fans pointing out what looks like a clear double standard, especially when it comes to things like ball patting, confidence, and even leadership style. Some are saying it's just part of the process. Others believe something deeper is going on. And then you look at what's happening inside the Cleveland Browns, and it gets even more confusing. Because while parts of the media seem unsure, dismissive, or even critical of Shedeur, there are also signs that the organization itself might be seeing something completely different. You've got mixed messages, conflicting opinions, and a quarterback situation that doesn't seem as clear as people expected. Add in the presence of Deshaun Watson, the uncertainty around the depth chart, and the constant speculation coming from insiders, and now you've got a situation where nobody really knows what's going to happen next. But here's the thing. Sometimes the loudest conversations aren't the most important ones. Sometimes the real story is the one that's happening quietly, behind the scenes, away from the headlines, where decisions are actually being made. And if you pay close enough attention, you might start to realize this situation isn't as balanced as it looks. Let's start with the moment that really sparked this entire conversation, because on the surface, it seems small, but the reaction to it tells a much bigger story. During the pre-draft process, Shedeur Sanders was heavily criticized for one specific thing, patting the ball before throwing. Analysts broke it down like it was a serious flaw. You heard it everywhere. That won't work in the NFL. He's going to get sacked. He needs to fix that immediately. It became one of the main talking points surrounding his game. And just like that, a routine quarterback habit turned into a narrative. But here, where things take a turn. Recently, clips started circulating of other quarterbacks, like Fernando Mendoza and even Ty Simpson, doing the exact same thing. Same motion, same timing, same issue that was supposedly such a big deal. And yet, the reaction? Almost nothing. No major criticism, no deep breakdowns, no headlines calling it a problem, just quiet acceptance like it's a normal part of playing the position. And that's where fans started connecting the dots. Because if it was truly a serious flaw, wouldn't everyone be getting called out the same way? Wouldn't it be a consistent concern across the board? Instead, it feels selective. Now, to be fair, some might argue that every prospect gets criticized differently. Different players, different expectations, different levels of scrutiny. That's part of the process. But others aren't buying that explanation. There's been a lot of buzz online, with fans saying this isn't about mechanics, it's about narrative. That once Shedeur was labeled in a certain way, everything he did started getting viewed through that lens. Every small detail became amplified, while similar things from other players were overlooked. And if that's true, it changes how you look at everything. Because now, it's not just about what he's doing, it's about how it's being interpreted. And in a league where perception can shape opportunity, that matters more than people think. So the real question becomes, was ball patting ever actually the issue? Or was it just the easiest way to start a narrative that followed him all the way into the league? But here, where the situation really starts to get interesting, because the way Shedeur Sanders is being discussed doesn't always match what's actually happening. On one side, you've got media personalities brushing things off. Some are saying fans are overreacting. Others are acting like the comparisons don't matter, almost like the conversation around Shedeur is being intentionally minimized. And that's what's catching people's attention. Because when fans point out clear examples, like the ball-patting situation, the response isn't to address it directly. Instead, it's dismissed, labeled as fanfiction, reaching, or people just trying to make excuses. But here's the problem. The evidence is right there. You can see other quarterbacks doing the same things Shedeur was criticized for. You can see the difference in how it's being covered. So when people bring that up, they're not just making things up, they're reacting to what they're seeing in real time. And that's why this debate keeps growing. Some fans believe the narrative around Shedeur was already decided before he even stepped into the draft process. That once he was labeled a certain way, whether it was about his mechanics, his personality, or his confidence, everything after that just reinforced that image. Now, to be fair, not everyone agrees with that. There are voices saying this is just how the media works, that every player gets criticized differently, that some players naturally draw more attention than others, especially when expectations are high. But others aren't convinced. Because when the same behavior gets two completely different reactions, it's hard to ignore. It creates a sense that the conversation isn't fully balanced, that some players are being evaluated under a different lens. And that's where the gap between narrative and reality starts to show. Because while the media discussion might focus on what Shedeur isn't doing or what he needs to fix, the reality might be something completely different. It's been said that internally, things could look much more positive, that the work, the preparation, the development, it's all happening, just not being highlighted the same way publicly. And if that's true, then the biggest question isn't just about performance. It's about who controls the narrative and why it looks so different from what's actually unfolding. But here, where the conversation takes another turn, because it's not just about mechanics anymore, it's about personality. And specifically, how Shedeur Sanders carries himself. Throughout the draft process, and even now, one of the biggest criticisms thrown his way has been his confidence. You've heard the words, cocky, arrogant, too flashy. Those labels started popping up early, and once they did, they stuck. But here's the part that has people questioning everything. That same level of confidence. It's praised in other quarterbacks. When other players speak boldly, show swagger, or carry themselves like they believe they're the best, it's called leadership. It's called presence. It's seen as a positive trait, something teams actually look for in a franchise quarterback. So why does it feel different with Shedeur? That's the question fans keep asking. Because when you really look at it, confidence is almost a requirement at the quarterback position. You're leading a locker room. You're making split-second decisions. You're expected to command respect the moment you step on the field. Without belief in yourself, it's almost impossible to succeed. And yet, when Shedeur shows that belief, the reaction seems split. Some see it as a strength, others see it as a problem. There's been growing buzz online, with fans suggesting that this might not be about confidence at all, but about perception. That once Shedeur was labeled as different, everything he did started being viewed through that lens. It's even been said that part of the issue is that he didn't follow the traditional path. He didn't come in trying to fit a certain mold. He didn't tone himself down to match expectations. Instead, he stayed true to who he is. And depending on who you ask, that either makes him stand out or makes him a target. Now, to be fair, some analysts argue that perception matters in the NFL, that how you present yourself can impact how teams and media respond to you. And in a league built on structure and tradition, stepping outside that norm can bring extra attention. But others believe that attention hasn't been evenly applied. Because when similar traits are praised in one player and criticized in another, it raises a bigger question. Is this really about attitude? Or is it about who's showing it? And if that perception doesn't change, it might continue to shape how Shedeur is viewed long, before he even gets the chance to prove it on the field. But here, where things get even more complicated, because the real tension isn't just about Shedeur Sanders, it's about the divide surrounding him. And nowhere is that more obvious than in the way the Cleveland Browns media is reacting right now. On one side, you've got voices that clearly aren't sold on Shedeur. They question his ceiling, they bring up his flaws, some even openly say they don't believe he's the long-term answer. That skepticism is loud, consistent, and hard to miss. But on the other side, there's a problem. Because those same voices don't seem fully confident in Deshaun Watson either. And that's what makes this situation so unique. You've got a media landscape where it feels like nobody is truly the guy. One quarterback comes with questions about performance and consistency. The other comes with doubts, narratives, and constant scrutiny. And instead of a clear direction, it feels like everything is stuck in the middle. That divide is starting to spill over into the fan base too. Some fans are leaning towards Shedeur, intrigued by his upside and what he could become. Others are hesitant, unsure if he's ready or if the hype matches reality. And then there are those who are simply tired of uncertainty, wanting any answer that finally stabilizes the position. But here's the deeper layer. It's been said that part of this divide comes from how different people want the situation to play out. Some media members may prefer a safer option. Others may be drawn to potential. And when those preferences mix with analysis, the conversation can start to feel inconsistent. Now, to be fair, this kind of split isn't entirely unusual. Quarterback debates happen everywhere. But what makes this one stand out is how unclear everything feels. There's no strong consensus, no unified direction, just a mix of opinions, speculation, and shifting narratives. And when that happens, it creates noise. A lot of it, which makes it harder to tell what's actually real and what's just part of the ongoing debate. But one thing is certain. When a situation feels this divided, it usually means something bigger is happening beneath the surface. And whatever that is, it hasn't fully revealed itself yet. But just when it feels like this conversation is starting to center around Shedeur Sanders, there's one reality that keeps pulling everything back. Deshaun Watson is still there. And that changes everything. Because no matter how much buzz is building around Shedeur, the Cleveland Browns are still deeply tied to Watson, financially, structurally, and publicly. This wasn't just a normal signing. This was a massive commitment, the kind of move that a franchise is expected to stand by. But here, where things get complicated. The version of Watson that Cleveland expected hasn't consistently shown up. Injuries, time away, and uneven performances have made it hard for him to fully regain that elite form. And now, instead of certainty, there's hesitation. You can feel it. Even in media discussions, there's no clear confidence. Some still believe he can bounce back. Others think that version of him might not return. And that uncertainty creates a strange situation where nobody feels fully secure about the position. And that's where Shedeur's presence becomes even more significant. Because now, it's not just about developing a young quarterback, it's about what happens if he starts looking like the better option. There's been speculation that the Browns are trying to walk a fine line. On one hand, they want to give Watson a fair opportunity, especially considering everything invested in him. On the other hand, they can't ignore what's happening in front of them if another quarterback starts gaining momentum. And that creates tension behind the scenes. Because if Shedeur continues to impress through preparation, presence, and performance, it forces a decision the team might not have been ready to make this early. Do you stay committed to the past? Or do you start leaning into the future? Now, to be clear, nothing has been decided yet. This is still unfolding, and publicly, everything is being framed as a competition. But it's been said that situations like this can shift quickly. Because once doubt creeps in, it doesn't take much for the direction to change. And right now, that doubt surrounding Watson, combined with the quiet momentum building around Shedeur, is creating a scenario where the balance could tip at any moment. But here, where this situation takes another unexpected turn, because if you're looking for a clear answer on what's actually happening inside the Cleveland Browns, you're probably not going to find one. And that's the problem. Because usually, around this time of the offseason, there are strong signals coming out of organizations, insider reports, leaks, clear direction, something that gives fans and analysts a sense of where things are headed. But right now, it's all over the place. You've got reporters going back and forth, offering different takes, different guesses, and sometimes completely opposite opinions. One minute, it sounds like the team is leaning one way. The next minute, it feels like everything is wide open again. And that inconsistency is raising questions. There's been growing speculation that even some of the most well-known insiders don't actually have a clear read on the situation, that the usual flow of inside information, the kind that typically shapes media narratives, isn't as strong right now. In other words, a lot of people are guessing. Now, to be fair, that doesn't mean nobody knows anything. Teams are always working behind closed doors, and not everything is meant to be public. But when the information coming out is this scattered, it suggests something different. It suggests uncertainty. And that uncertainty is being felt everywhere. Some reports claim the team is still evaluating everything carefully, not rushing into a decision. Others suggest that internal opinions might be split, with different voices leaning in different directions. And then there are those who believe the Browns are intentionally keeping things quiet to avoid tipping their hand too early. All of that might be true, or none of it might be. And that's what makes this moment so difficult to read. Because without clear information, narratives start filling the gap, opinions become louder, speculation spreads faster, and suddenly it becomes harder to separate what's real from what's just being assumed. Meanwhile, players like Shedeur Sanders and Deshaun Watson are still at the center of it all, even as the story around them continues to shift. So right now, the truth isn't fully visible. It's somewhere behind the scenes, being shaped by decisions, conversations, and evaluations that haven't been revealed yet. And until that changes, everything you're hearing might be part insight and part guess. But here's what's really starting to stand out, and it's the part that fans can't ignore anymore. This isn't just about performance, it's not just about mechanics, and it's definitely not just about one quarterback versus another. It's about consistency. Because when fans look at how Shedeur Sanders has been treated compared to other players, they're seeing patterns that don't quite line up. The same actions get different reactions. The same traits get labeled differently. And over time, that starts to feel less like coincidence and more like something deeper. Take everything we've talked about. The ball-patting criticism, the confidence being called arrogance, the way his process was questioned. Then compare that to how other quarterbacks, like Fernando Mendoza or others in the draft conversation, are being discussed. It doesn't feel the same. And fans are picking up on that. There's been a growing wave of discussion online where people are pointing out what they believe is a double standard, not claiming anything definitively, but asking questions. Why is one player under a microscope while others move more quietly? Why do certain narratives stick so strongly to one name, but not to others? Now, to be fair, some will say this is just part of the spotlight. Bigger names get more attention. More attention means more criticism. That's how it works. But others believe it goes beyond that. It's been said that once a narrative forms, it can shape everything that follows. Every performance, every comment, every small detail gets filtered through that lens. And for Shedeur, some fans feel like that lens was set early and hasn't changed since. At the same time, you've got the ongoing uncertainty in Cleveland. The situation with Deshaun Watson, the mixed signals from the media, and the lack of clear answers from insiders, all of that adds fuel to the fire. Because when nothing feels certain, people start looking closer at what is happening. And what they're seeing is a player who might be judged differently than the rest. So now the conversation isn't just about who wins the job. It's about whether the playing field was ever truly even to begin with. And if that question keeps growing louder, it might force people to look at this entire situation in a completely different way. So when you step back and look at everything, the criticism, the comparisons, the media reactions, and what's happening inside the Cleveland Browns, it starts to feel like this situation was never just about football. It's about perception. Because somehow, Shedeur Sanders became the center of conversations that don't seem to apply equally to everyone else. The same habits get different reactions. The same confidence gets labeled differently. And over time, those differences start to shape how people view a player before he even gets a real opportunity to prove himself. At the same time, the Browns are dealing with their own complicated reality. They're still tied to Deshaun Watson, a player they invested heavily in, while also facing growing uncertainty about the future. Add in the mixed signals from media, the lack of clear insider information, and the ongoing debate around the quarterback room, and now you've got a situation where nothing feels fully settled. And that's what makes this moment so important. Because when everything is unclear, narratives become powerful. They shape expectations, they influence opinions, and sometimes they stick longer than they should. So now the real question isn't just about who wins the starting job. It's bigger than that. Is this really about talent and performance? Or has perception already played a role in shaping how this entire situation is unfolding? Because if the playing field hasn't been completely even from the start, then what we're watching right now might not just be a competition. It might be someone trying to break through a narrative that was created long before he ever stepped onto the field. And if Shedeur Sanders manages to do that, then this story won't just be about a quarterback battle. It'll be about proving that perception doesn't always decide reality.